underway. Once again, everybody, it's Darryl Huckaby with What the Huck, and I'm here to talk about Friday Night Lights and high school football. The season is just underway, and I have a very, very special guest here today, Kevin Reach. Kevin is the head coach at Monroe area high school, the Purple Hurricanes, and he's in his 9th year at Monroe and is already the winningest coach in Walton County history among Georgia High School Association schools. He's won 2 region championships, taken the Hurricanes to an Elite 8, and when he was at Collins Hill High School in Gwinnett County, took that team all the way to the state championship game. But here's what you don't know about Kevin Reach. He and I go way, way, way back, and I coached Kevin at Clarkston High School in 1981 and 82, 83, long, long time ago. I taught him everything he knows, which is obviously not true. But Kevin, welcome to What the Huck. How are you?
I appreciate you having me here. I'm excited. I'm excited about talking about high school football, and just seeing you again has just brought back so many memories of my high school days.
Kevin was a quarterback, and we ran the Wishbone. Coach Tommy Stringer, a great, great human being, great coach. Coach Stringer was an Alabama guy. When Bear Bryant went to the Wishbone, I think Coach Stringer went over and said, well, it's good enough for Bear Bryant, it's good enough for me. And we ran the Wishbone at Clarkston, and we were again together at Loganville, and we would still run that triple option. And Kevin was the running quarterback. But every now and then I would be calling the plays on the sideline. Coach Stringer would be sending them down from up above in the press box. I'd get those bad connections on that headset, and I just couldn't quite get the play he wanted. And we'd air it out and throw it a little bit. You remember those days, Kevin?
Yeah, I do. I remember 9th grade football when Coach Stringer was up there. Well, actually, back then it was called JV, right. or B team. It was actually called B team. It was made up of 9th and 10th graders, and we were a wishbone team. We'd run the wishbone all week, but I loved to throw the football, and Coach Huckaby, we kind of had that thing going there that. He wanted to throw the football too. So, when Coach Stringer wasn't there, we were throwing the hound out of the ball, and it was always a lot of fun. But I was very lucky to have such great men around me. Just with Coach Stringer and Coach Huckaby, and Coach Chonko and Coach Massey. Coach Massey was on my staff for so many years, and Coach Holdren, who's coaching right over here at Morgan County. We just had such a great coaching staff, and it was always a lot of fun.
We did have a really, really good coaching staff. We had people that loved football, but more importantly, they loved young people, and they loved teaching young people. They loved setting an example for young people. There was Coach Stringer, as you mentioned, Michael Chonko, who was a football coach and a wrestling coach, one of my best friends ever. We were talking before the show. Mike was married to Scotty Kirkland, who was a Newton County girl. I'd known Scotty my whole life, and we were kind of reunited when I got to Clarkston. Larry Massey was great, great defensive mind. Mike Holdren, close friend. Dennis Beatty.
Oh yeah, love Dennis.
We had a super staff, and later all those guys went over to Loganville, and I was at Woodward Academy coaching at the time, but after they had been there a year, I left Woodward and came over and joined them at Loganville for a few more years. Now, did you coach at Loganville during at any point? Weren't you at Loganville at that time?
With Coach Stringer?
Yeah.
I left Clarkston in '94, and he asked me to come over. And at the time, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. And after my first year, he actually made me offensive coordinator. And, I had Chonko over there and Coach Massey, and, Holdren was there. And, it was just kind of like a reunion again from the time they coached me. But, yeah, I was there 9 years at Loganville. And, it was a lot of fun.
It was a good place, good people. Well, high school football in general has been in my blood all my life. When I was a kid, we'd go to the high school games. It was a big, big deal. I went to Newton County schools. I was raised in Porterdale, and we played. The high school played at Sharp Field, and I remember being 8, 9 years old. We'd go to the football game. We didn't see very much of the football game. We would get a paper cup and play football in the end zone or behind the end zone or behind the stadium. We would have a great, great time, but I can still smell the mud and the popcorn and all that mixture, the cheerleaders, the marching bands. It's always been just a big part of my life. And after I finished coaching, my children were all in the marching band, so we were there every Friday night for year after year after year. When I was teaching at Heritage High School and no longer coaching football, I was the announcer for the marching band, and we still go. My wife and I still go to high school games every Friday night during the fall, wherever we are. Last Friday night, we had the Hog Mountain Bowl in Oconee County, where I live, and that is the most amazing high school setting I've ever seen for that one game, because the whole county is divided into a red side and a blue side. Oconee County is blue, the southern part of the county. North Oconee is red, the north part of the county, and it's a big rival. But when you go, the stands are filled. But more than any other rivalry I've ever been to, everybody that goes to that game wears either a red shirt or a blue shirt. There's no white, there's no in between, and one side is completely red when you look across the field, the other side is completely blue. We moved to Oconee County in 2020, which is, of course, an election year, and we moved this time of year in August, third week in August, and everybody was asking me everywhere I went, are you red or blue? Are you red or blue? I thought they were talking about the election.
Yeah.
I said, well, I'm red. Oh, we're blue. We're blue. We're blue. Everybody. Finally, I said, how did so many Democrats get in my community in Oconee County? He said, we're not talking about politics. We're talking about the Hog Mountain Bowl. So my son was at that time a teacher at North Oconee High School, now the assistant principal. So we've always been red side, but we live on the blue side. So it's we went to the Hog Mountain Bowl this week, and Oconee County, North had won 5 straight years. And Oconee had a 14-7 halftime lead, but North came out, blocked 2 punts, and scored to start the second half and went on to a 42-21 win. Now, you had a big game with an in-county rival Friday yourself, Walnut Grove. Tell me how that went.
Oh, it was great. Actually, Walnut Grove beat us last year. That was the first time, I think, in 7 years. And they had a good football team. I'm not saying we took them lightly, but you know, I felt like we were a better football team than them last year. 2 years ago, they were loaded. They had some great talent, and we ended up squeaking one by. But last year, I thought we were a better football team than them. And I'm not saying we took them lightly, but they ended up blocking a punt and having some big plays. So this year, you know, it's a 365-day game. So you got to sit there and eat crow, and you got to keep your mouth closed for 365 days. And it's kind of like I told our kids, those 365 days are up. Now we get to dictate what we're going to do for the next 365 days. So we ended up playing really well. We had, 654 total yards.
Wow.
Our quarterback had 254 yards, had 4 touchdowns. We had another kid right at 100 yards rushing. I mean, it was really, I think we had 400 and plus yards rushing and like 150 some odd yards passing. But yeah, I was very proud. Our defense, you know, they had 2 big plays. They scored a touchdown. We were kind of in the wrong defense at the time, and you know, we were kind of spilling the play, and the kid broke it and scored a touchdown. Then they had a long pass play, and we kept them out of the end zone. They kicked a field goal, so we kept them to 10 points. But yeah, we you know, it was a big 42-10 victory for us.
Well, there's no rest for the weary. You got another in-county rivalry this week. Isn't that correct? You play Loganville.
Yeah, Loganville. Yeah,
and it's kind of been a rivalry for a long time.
Yeah.
Walnut Grove's kind of a new kid on the block, but Loganville and Monroe have been around for a long time.
Yeah, it's kind of like you're talking about the North Oconee. I mean, it's going to be a packed house. You're either purple or you're red. You know, there's no in between. You know, either you live on this side of the county, you live on that side of the county, and it's always been a big big game for us. We've actually this is my 10th year there, so I think we're 7-2 against them, and the 2 games we lost, they were both in overtime, or one of them was in overtime, and the other one was like the last second of the game. So it's a big rivalry game for us, and they got a good football team this year.
Well, we wish you luck. This is Darryl Huckaby with Kevin Reach on Real Country WMOQ 92.3 FM. Welcome back. I'm Darryl Huckaby here with Kevin Reach, head coach of the Monroe Area Purple Hurricanes. We're talking about their upcoming game with Loganville, a cross-county rivalry. And Chastity, I believe we're going to broadcast that game. What can you tell me about that?
Absolutely. So our guys, Jeff Hood and John Wilson, that is going to be our featured game of the week. So Friday, August the 24th, we will be over at Loganville High School, and we'll do a live remote. So come say hello to John and Jeff and get all your up-to-date scores. So, and you can also listen live on WKUN. So we've kind of made some little changes to the format. So normally you would tune in for the station, or tune in here for all your football highlights and everything like that. But instead this year we're doing live at WKUN on our sister station 102.5. And then Brock Bridges will be here on 92.3 side, giving all the states updates, highlights, and then keeping the country music hits going.
Friday Night Lights, all high
so
school
fun.
football.
Yes.
It's great. And what about the internet? If you're outside the area, can you tune in and listen live on the internet?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Check out WKUNradio.com, and you can stream us live.
There you have it. And I was telling Coach Reach before we started today that he knew that I'd coached at Loganville because we'd coached together over there. He knew I'd coached at Clarkston when he was a player there, but he did not know that I coached the Monroe Area Purple Hurricanes JV team in 1974 and worked with the varsity as well. Jim Stottlemyre was the coach. Dennis Horn was on that staff. David Stevenson. We had a real good staff. Had a lot. James Pinion had a lot of fun. And I learned a lot. I did not play high school football except for my freshman year. I was big into basketball. Newton County was was at Newton County. We played school and worked basketball. It's a little bit different. So, but I coached the JV team at Monroe. Learned a lot from Coach Stottlemyre, and had coached football for a long, long time after that. Kevin, tell me how you got into football. You were telling me you played rec league in the Tucker League. Tell me about how you fell in love with the game of football.
Yeah, my father was he was a big football guy, and my brother and I, kind of grew up with it ever since we were probably 5-6 years old. We grew up in the Tucker youth program, and my father was actually the president of the Tucker Youth Association, and kind of coached us all the way through. And we played for that Bobby Dodd Bowl back in the day. We were at one time one of the probably top 3 programs in the country. I think there was a place in California, the Atlanta Colts organization, and the Tucker Lions, and just great people. I mean, great coaches. I learned a lot, from being in that part during that time, and then I started going to Clarkston High School, and back then, DeKalb County was 8th through 12th, so I was around those guys my 8th grade year, and Coach Stringer was a head football coach, and he was a guy that I really looked up to, and Darryl, you being on that staff, and Coach Tonko, Coach Massey, and all those guys are just men of integrity, and I just loved it. I couldn't get enough of it, and played all the way through. After my senior year, I was fortunate enough to get a football scholarship to Chuan University, which is a Division II school, and played. My first year, I went there on a football, baseball, and my college coach came up to me and said, if you want to be the starting quarterback, you're going to have to make a decision. You want to be a baseball guy or a football guy? So I just stuck with football, but that's kind of how it ended up. And I actually graduated. When I graduated from college, I was working at AT&T, and something was missing. I missed the game so much, and I was out jogging one day, and I ended up running into my old high school football coach, my offense coordinator, Roy Sparks, and he said, I just took over the job at Clarkston. Coach Stringer had left and gone to Loganville, and he said, I need somebody to come and work with the quarterbacks. And I said, well, let me come out there. I get done with work about 3 o'clock, 3:10, and I'll come out and, help you out. And after about a week, I knew what I wanted to do. I went back to my dad, and I said, Dad, I know what I want to do the rest of my life. I think this is my calling. And, 39 years later, that's what I'm doing. So,
Roy Sparks, what a great human being. Good, better, best. Never let it rest till the good get better and the better get best. I heard Coach Sparks say that every day for years and years and years. Roy had a identical twin brother named Terry, and they married identical twins, and they lived next door to one another in the same neighborhood, and all of their kids looked alike, and they used to laugh. They'd go to Disney World on some vacation every summer, and nobody knew who went with who, and it was I hadn't thought about Coach Sparks in a long time. What a great human being. 38 years. Let's talk about how the game has changed. Now, I first started coaching in 1974, and we really didn't know anything back then. We were you didn't give anybody water. You were a sissy. You were a weakling if you wanted water during a football practice. We would actually hand out salt tablets.
Yes.
We probably had 3 or 4 people on the coaching staff that coached everything. And now I was watching TV. I think Saturday night I turned on and Gainesville was playing Buford in that multi-million-dollar stadium up there, and they had. It's just a world of difference. What have you noticed the most about the changes since you started coaching? It's hard to believe you've been coaching 38 years, because I think I coached you about 5 years ago in my mind. So,
it's like you said. Back in the day, you did very little weight training. Nutrition was not really that big of a deal.
Yeah, we were talking about pregame meals when we were at Clarkston. We were having steaks before every game, which is probably the worst thing that you could do. Then we went to that period where pasta. Everybody would load up on carbs and have pasta. Nutrition is a big part of it now. Weight training.
It is, yeah.
How many coaches on your staff?
We've got with our trainer, I think we're around 15.
Wow.
Yeah, I've got a ninth grade even though we're only a 4A program, I've got a ninth grade, a JV, and a varsity program. So, I think we're around 15. I've got a kicking coach, and back in the day when I first started out coaching at Clarkston, we'd have we have two that did the JV. I did the offense, and Mike Aiken, he did the defense, and then we were all varsity coaches, but that was it. And I coached both sides of the ball. I coached the quarterbacks, and then I coached the safeties. And nowadays, you don't do that. You've got a personal coach that you got. You got an offensive line coach. You got an H-back coach. You got a running back coach, a defense, a corners coach, a safeties coach, and it's just different.
Yeah, when I was at Clarkston, I was the offensive line coach, and I coached the Hogs. And we got after it. We were down and dirty down there. But on Saturdays, I would coach the offense on the JV, and Mike Holdren would coach the defense. And Coach Stringer would come by and sit in the box and try to call plays. But when I wasn't paying attention to him, he just quit coming and went to Alabama to the college games those days. But I remember we were playing Chamblee. You may remember this day in the JV football game. Chamblee was a big rival. They were big, they were tough. They were one of the premier schools in DeKalb County at the time, and 0-0 at halftime, and we just drew up a play in the dirt.
That. You're talking about the JV game.
Yeah,
I do remember that.
We drew up a play in the dirt. We broke the bone, put the halfback in motion, fake to the fullback, and threw a pop pass to the tight end on delay motion, and scored a touchdown, won the game, beat Chamblee 7-0. That was a big day. And Coach Stringer got mad when he found out we had done that. He didn't care that we had won. We had broken the bone. He wanted us to run the wishbone. He was getting ready for the varsity. It was great fun. Now, I like the pageantry of high school football. And being a head coach, and you don't get to enjoy that as much. But what's it like on a Friday at a high school? I lived in South Georgia for a couple of years, and there's nothing that compares to a Friday in a South Georgia high school. But what's the atmosphere like around Monroe these days?
It's great. There's one thing about, like, when I was at Collins Hill, now we had a great student body, and we packed the house over there at the Hill. But one thing about small town football, we actually had a parade for our football program last Thursday. And this is like South Georgia football. Monroe's kind of like a South Georgia high school just tucked away where everybody comes out. A lot of the teachers there, people in the community, they went to high school at Monroe.
Right.
At Collins Hill, you didn't have that. As big as we were at Collins Hill, you didn't have where, we've got a lot of the alumni. A lot of people that are on my booster club, they're alumni. They went to school there, and it's special. It really is amazing. Monroe High School's been there for over 100 years, and they've accepted me as one of their own. And I tell you, I love it. They packed the house, especially big rivalry games this past week against Walnut Grove. It was packed out. It was packed out on our side. It was packed out on Walnut Grove side. But I expected it to even be more people this week with the Loganville game.
Absolutely, it goes way back. Well, let's talk about maybe the dark side a little bit. Everybody complains about college football. It's not pure anymore. When I went to the North Oconee County game last week, I just had chill bumps before the game because I felt like it was pure football. But I know that NIL and recruiting and all the things that the college transfer portal, all the things that the colleges are dealing with, unfortunately, is trickling down into high school football. And I don't think that makes it better. I know a lot of the city school systems. I know a lot of the independent school systems. actively recruit. I know that the Georgia High School Association can't possibly keep up with all the transfers. There's a kid, this Newsmeyer kid, whose brother played LSU, is coming to Georgia next year. He was played at Texas last year and transferred at Christmas to another school to play. And then the Texas High School Association ruled him ineligible because he had transferred purely for athletic reasons. Yeah. And so he tried to come to Georgia and play, and I won't get into the details, but I know that he tried to enroll at 3 or 4 different schools in Georgia. And the Georgia High School Association said, no, you were at 2 schools within the last calendar year without a move, so you're not eligible. He wound up going to Louisiana and finding a school that he could play at this year. Has that how much of that do you see? How big a problem is it in your league?
Well, the NIL, we don't really deal with that very much. Some of the bigger programs might. I know maybe Grayson. I know they had a kid that is getting paid NIL money. And it to me that takes away from high school football. I mean, and like you said, it is the purest form of football. The chances of you getting a college scholarship are probably around 1 or 2%. But it's just the love of football. You were talking about the play that you drew up. We played in the dirt, and I still remember that back in my 9th grade year. Yeah. People that played football, they still remember that time that you're in the huddle and you're sitting there and you're sweating and the blood's coming down and you're all just brothers, whether you're black or white, whoever it might be, and everybody's in that huddle together trying to have that same thing, that one goal to win the football game, and you don't get that anymore, And I've noticed it a little bit in high school football. Back in the day, like Coach Stringer, who was my high school coach, he stayed there for a long time. He stayed at Loganville for a long time. You don't see that very often. You're seeing people stay 2 or 3 years. Nobody's sinking roots like they used to. So I've seen that part kind of changing because that's kind of how the colleges are doing it, and you're not seeing them kind of just hook into that program, and if things aren't going well, they just say, well, you know what, I'm just going to move on to something else, and I've noticed that a little bit.
That's true, and that's a shame. I love the traditions, and you can't establish a tradition if you're not there. And I love that you've been at Monroe almost a decade now.
Yeah, it's going on 10 years.
And I hope you'll finish out your career there. I want to come and watch you. So many funny things happen as a coach. And when we come back from this break, I want to ask you about some of the more lighthearted things, experiences you might have with players, parents, and so forth. But I'm Darryl Huckaby. This is Real Country, WMOQ 92.3 FM. We'll be right back. This is Darryl Huckaby. What the Huck? We're here with Kevin Reach, head coach of the Monroe area Purple Hurricanes. We're talking football. We're talking Friday Night Lights. And, Kevin, I was just thinking about our careers. I taught 40 years, coached football for about 20 of those, and basketball for about 35. I had some funny things happen to me along the lines. It's not all seriousness. And, I was thinking about first year I was teaching was at Cousins Middle School, and I was the head football coach. And middle school football was a big deal. We worked hard at it. We had a great program. We had formed the Middle Georgia Junior High Athletic League, which I don't think exists anymore. We had 20 counties. We had schools from 20 counties, about a 40-team league, and it was a big deal. But I had a running back named Victor Hill, and Victor was a great running back, hurt his knee about third game of the season, and we were playing Sharp Middle School, the crosstown rival, in the last game of the year, and Victor's mother called me and said, Coach Huckaby, the doctors said that Victor can't play in that game Friday. He said, but, he wants to play real bad, and I just want to ask you, if I let Victor play and he got hurt worse, can that doctor sue me? I said, yes, ma'am, Ms. Hill. He probably could. He'd take a lot away from it. We probably don't need to let him play because we don't want to risk that. I'm putting you on the spot. What are some lighter moments you remember, funny things that have happened in your football career that you just had to stop and say, man?
One of the things was when I was at Clarkston High School. I think it was either my first or second year I was coaching. Back then it was B team, and we had this one kid who moved in. He was actually from Turkey, and he had been out there for about 2 weeks, and he didn't speak English, but he wanted to play football. So we got him his equipment and everything, and we had him there. And sure enough, he had been there for 2 weeks, and I didn't know what he did much at practice, but he was out there. Well, Coach Sparks was up in the press box, and I was talking to him, of course, and we were beating. I think it was Henderson High School back then, and we were beating them pretty good, and we were getting everybody that hadn't played into the game, and I remember him saying, "Hey, get the kid from Turkey in, let him play." And I looked down at Coach Aiken, and I said, "What does he play?" And Coach Aiken said, "I don't know." And I said, and Coach Sparks said, "Well, just put him at nose man. Just put him at nose man, and we'll just let him play there. He can't get anything messed up there." So they put him down at nose man, and the official comes over, puts the ball down, and sure enough, blows the whistle. And when he blows the whistle, the boy from Turkey came back, and he just kicked the ball and starts kicking it down the field. Here he had been with us for 2 weeks, and he thought he was playing soccer. And I knew right then. I said, "Oh my goodness!"
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Clarkston was a great place to coach because people talk about diversity. Baby, we had diversity at Clarkston. We had all the boat people, they called them, moved in those apartments on Indian Creek Trail. We had 18 or 19 languages spoken at Clarkston High School. But we also had all of the hearing impaired students from all of DeKalb County. First week I was there, your boy, Larry Massey, pulled the worst joke on me. There was a kid named Brian Graff. You may remember Brian Graff.
Sure. Yeah.
Brian, great football player, and but didn't say much. Didn't say anything. And I was in the coach's dressing room one day, and I said, I don't think Graff likes me very much. And Chonka, why do you say that, Coach? I said, well, he never speaks to me no matter what I say. And so Chonko spoke up and said, he can't hear you, Coach. And Massey picked up on it just like that. He said, that's right, Brian Graff's deaf. He's not hearing you. So for the next 2 days, I get in front of Brian Graff, and I talk to him, and they had let him in on the joke. And I was mouthing every word and speaking very distinctly so he could read my lips. For 2 days I'd done this. So we're in a timeout, rest period, water period, and Brian's on one knee, and I'm talking to him, explaining something, and all of a sudden, on the other end of the field, Coach Stringer blows his whistle and says, "Get over here, Graff." he didn't hesitate. He was behind. Coach Stringer was behind. He just jumped up, put on his helmet, and ran off. I said, Graf can hear. And Chonko and Massey just rolled on the ground. They had, for 2 days, they had been pulling that over on me. So the camaraderie, that's what I missed the most is you got so many people working toward a common goal. And, you just don't find that in many places in life. So I think that's one of the great parts of athletics. And you talk about memories. And, I still have memories of the kids I coached and the tiny little situations that might have seemed very insignificant at the time, but they blossomed, and it's worthwhile. It's a worthwhile way to spend a life. I can tell you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You were sitting there saying about my best friends are part of the coaching staff. I mean, I spend so much time with them, and some of the best memories that, we go on vacation together, and our Dr. Tribe, our team doctor, used to take our coaching staff on different trips. And just the time that we could spend doing that stuff, I mean, it's just memories that I'll have the rest of my life. But, I say this all the time to our coaching staff. What happens in that coach's office stays in that coaching office.
That's right.
There's things that go on, good, bad, and the ugly, that no matter what happens, we might have a disagreement or there might be something that happens, but it doesn't leave that coaching office. And, I've been fortunate enough to have good men around me that have been loyal to me, that, that's the first thing when I hire somebody is, it's got to be this way. We've got to make sure that you fit in with that coaching staff, because what happens in that coaching staff stays in that coaching staff.
Absolutely. I remember at Loganville, I was in charge of the offense. I was trying to move the ball down the field. Sometimes you just can't move that ball down the field. And Coach Massey got really upset. He came up to me one day and said, "You need to move the ball, Coach." I said, "Well, you need to stop the other team from moving the ball." And we flared up at one another. And then we both realized how stupid we sounded, and because we were both trying our best to do our job, and we started laughing at one another. But yeah, tempers flare, but it's brotherhood. It really, really, really is. Well, look forward down the line. What are you expecting out of your season? You're off to a good start. You got a big win over Walnut Grove. Got Loganville coming up. What's the rest of the year look like? Who's in your region that's going to be the real powerhouses that you have to contend with?
Well, Cherokee Bluff and Oconee will be the two big teams. We're going to be battle tested because every team we play this year is a 6A program. We're a 4A program, and we got Loganville this week. We got Habersham playing Habersham. Got Flowery Branch. The only one that's not is we got West Lawrence, who went 13-1 last year. It's kind of funny when you have success like we do, you can't find games.
That's right.
Especially in your classification. Now I did get some calls, because we were looking for some games, and my buddy at Colquitt, who was on my coaching staff at Collins Hill, I got a call from him, got a call from Grayson, got a call from Lowndes, so I get calls from some of the bigger programs, but it's kind of hard to find that schedule. But we're going to be battle tested, I think, going into the region.
We talked about atmosphere for a home game last week. What's a travel day look like? Back in the day, we'd jump on that yellow school bus and just go to the ball game. There were times at some schools I was at, I had to drive the school bus, and I didn't like that at all. Tell me how you travel, what you eat, how you leave school. What's a long trip look like for the Hurricanes?
I've got it broken down into, I've got it down to every 5 minutes basically is what we do. We'll get them out of school early. Just say we're playing somebody like an Oconee. We'll get them out of school early. We'll go over our game plan, meet with them in the weight room, and then we'll eat pregame meal about 3:20, and then we'll do an FCA, around 3:45, and then we'll walk back to where our field house is, and then we'll do our offensive meetings, our defensive meetings, and then We'll go ahead and get on the bus. You know, Oconee's not that far of a ride, so we might get on the bus around 5. I like to get to wherever we're going at 5:30, so I'll make sure that we leave. If we're going to a West Lawrence, which might be a 2-hour trip, we'll make sure that we leave 2 hours beforehand, and then you know we'll give them something to snack on something around 6 o'clock, and then probably 15 minutes before we go out. We'll make sure we have that quiet time, and first group leaves at 6:25, second group 6:30, third group at 6:35, and that's kind of how it.
How many buses do you take?
We take 3.
Do you always go school buses no matter where you're going, or do you sometimes rent?
Now sometimes we'll get a Greyhound. If it's a far trip, we'll go ahead and get a Greyhound. But for the most part, most of our games are pretty close by, so we'll take three school buses.
Now tell me about playoffs. You've been to the playoffs every year that you've been at Monroe?
Yep,
that's quite an accomplishment. I mean, it's one thing to have won more games than anybody else in the county history, but 8 straight years in playoffs is pretty strong.
Actually,
9 straight years.
Yeah, actually it's been 10 straight years now. They made the playoffs the year before I got there.
Okay, good. I'm sure that hasn't happened before in Monroe's history. So
no.
that's quite remarkable. What do you think about the playoff structure? When I was in high school, 8 teams made the playoffs. The region champions made the playoffs. And then when I started coaching, they had increased that to 2 teams per region. So the region champion and the region runner-up made the playoffs. Now, I think most classifications have 4 teams. And you get a lot of 1s playing 4s in the first round of the playoffs. Do you think that's necessary? How many times does a 1 beat a 4?
Yeah.
What do you?
Well, it's power ranking now, so we don't even do the top 4 out of our regions anymore. So what they do
is that new this year?
We actually did it last year. Throughout the state now, GHSA decided to the top 32 teams. They have a formula that they do, and the top 32 teams play in it, which I think it's good and bad. I think, like for instance, when I was at Collins Hill back in 2013, we had it was us, Norcross, North Gwinnett. We all went 9-1, and we all tied for the region championship. So we had to go and flip a coin to find out where we were placed, and we ended up Norcross was 1, we were 2, and North Gwinnett was 3. Well, here's North Gwinnett. They were ranked 2nd in the state at the time. Norcross was ranked number 1 in the state, and we were ranked number 3 in the state, and we were all in the same region. And it's funny the way it came out at the end of the year. Norcross played North Gwinnett, and we finished 3rd in the state that year, and we all came from one region.
Wow!
So I think it's a good idea when you got situations like that, because then we wouldn't see each other, and we might be the top 3 or 4 teams, and so I think a power ranking's good in that. But in other ways, I don't think it's like you have some teams that you're better than, but you end up losing a game or 2, and they might be undefeated, but they're playing a weaker schedule, and all of a sudden they get a weak team early, and sometimes that's not good. You get some of these schools up north, and they're playing some of these schools in the metro area, and our 4 can beat their 1.
Right. How about classifications? 6 enough? 7 too many? We got it just about right.
I think with the pride, I think it's about right now. I think if you can have anywhere between 60, 65 teams in a classification, I think you're doing pretty good. I think you get around 80. I think that's too many. I think if you can be anywhere between 50 and 60, I think that's about right.
I'm Darryl Huckaby. We're here on Real Country WMOQ with Kevin Reach, and we'll be right back. I'm Darryl Huckaby back with you. Kevin Reach, head coach of the Monroe area Purple Hurricanes, is in the studio with us. Coach Reach's team has a big game, and it's our game of the week coming up. Loganville High School versus Monroe Area High School. You can listen to that game, Good Time Oldies, stream on WKUNradio.com or tune in to 102.5 or 92.3. For updates, John Wilson and Jeff Hood will be in the booth calling that game, so tune in Friday night to get your football fix. Loganville versus Monroe, two old-time rivals, and we're here with the coach of the Monroe area team, Kevin Reach. Kevin, we're talking about all the good things about high school football. We're talking about some of the problems that high school football may be facing and how we can ward those off. But we were talking during the break about the loyalties of your coaching staff. Talk to us about your coaching staff, because they're really kind of like a family, because you spend more time with the coaches during season than you do with your family, and I know that from many years coaching myself. So tell us about your coaching staff. I know you're real proud of it.
Well, probably my best friend is the assistant head coach, Brandon Myhan. He's followed me wherever I've been, when I was in Newton County, and then when I went to Collins Hill, and he had been with me we've been together almost 20 years or over 20 years. And, we tell each other everything. So the loyalty there is just unbelievable. And like my defensive coordinator, Coach Massey was with me. He coached me in high school, and he was my defensive coordinator at Collins Hill and at Monroe. And he retired 2 years ago. And it's funny how this stuff works, but I picked up Heath Herron, who was the defensive coordinator at Norcross, and we had such a tough time when I was at Collins Hill because they were always so good defensively that I ended up, talking to Keith Maloof when Keith Maloof retired, and sure enough got him over there. And then Michael Hill, who's our offensive coordinator, Robert Hill, his dad, was over at Parkview and was the offensive coordinator at Parkview all those years they won the state title. And, Michael Hill grew up in it. And, I knew early, probably back in October, that he was one that when I lost my offensive coordinator, who had been with me all those years through, when I was at Collins Hill and, all those years at Monroe, he went into administration. And, I had to pick one up. And sure enough, I knew what he brought. And I knew what kind of man he was. And then, I've got a great staff. I mean, I feel like there's 4 or 5 guys that could easily be head football coaches.
You got coaching royalty down there at Monroe. Those are big names. Oh, yeah. And your coaching staff is like your family, but you also have to deal with family. And I learned that if I was going to be successful, I had to have support from my family. I know your wife, Amy. I taught her at Clarkson many, many years ago. I didn't know the story about how y'all got together. I wondered if y'all had dated in high school. You told me it was about 15 years later because you were too wild and rambunctious for her. She's the scholar, and I remember that about Amy. She's from a great Clarkston family, but Amy is a miracle. She has been through some medical hardships, and a lot of us have prayed her to good health. If it's not too tough, talk to us about Amy and what she means to your coaching journey.
Yeah, I'm just so blessed to have a woman like Amy. She gets the coaching part of it. We did not date in high school. She was definitely way too good for me. We met 15 years later, and I still can't believe that she said yes. I still hadn't figured that one out. But she is a great coach's wife. I mean, I think a lot of the younger coaches' wives, they can come to her, and she's just so knowledgeable about things. And, I don't think you can be a good head football coach if you don't have the right woman there, because there's so many different things that I ask her on a daily basis. And there's so many times when I deal with different situations. It might even be a parent situation or something of that nature. And she can give me such great advice that, I'll sit there and I'll think about it. And, I believe in the 48-hour rule. If there's something that's taking place, whether it's through through a parent, I believe in 48 hours before I talk to that person. And, I learned that stuff from Amy. It's so important to have a good person at your side.
Well, welcome to the Outkicked Your Coverage Club. I've been a member for 44 years myself, and it's very, very important. Is there a lot of recruiting going on in high school football? I coached at Woodward Academy for 7 years, and of course the privates, it's always, the Woodward Academies, the Marist, the Westminsters, Lovett's. Everybody always accused us of recruiting back in those days. We had a kid named Kenny Spear who went to Notre Dame, great running back, and Graham Hickson was, at the time he retired at Woodward, was the winningest high school coach in Georgia. And he said, I'm a great judge of talent. I hired his mother to teach at our school when he was 5 years old because I knew he was going to be an All-American. But I know that there's a lot of places that does go on. What are your thoughts on that? Do you run into that? Does it create a problem for you, or do you just say, well, it is what it is, we're going to play with what we got?
Well, like my time when I was at Collins Hill in Gwinnett County, there were a couple incidents that I can think of. And I really wish coaches would get to this point. There was a boy named Robert Beal at Norcross who ended up playing at Georgia. And, I was having my team meeting, and sure enough, he showed up there. And he was probably one of the top players in the state of Georgia. And sure enough, Darryl, I told him, I said, look, you cannot play here. You need to get with Coach Maloof, and y'all got to figure out whatever you need to figure out. So I called Coach Maloof and said, Coach, you need to come get your boy. And the same thing with Jess Simpson. I had one of my best players when I was at Collins Hill go over to Buford and was over there and all. And sure enough, Jess called me and said, hey, Kevin, I want you to know that, we got a beautiful looking kid over here that got somebody in the community that's trying to get him swayed to come over here to Buford. And, I just want to make sure that you realize that I'm not doing this. And, when you get things like that happen, I think coaches can get together and make sure some of that stuff doesn't take place. But, that's kind of something that I think we can do a better job at. But, yes, it is going on. Not so much at Monroe, but, yeah, it's getting bad.
It's been going on a long time. When I was at Clarkston, one of the greatest high school players in Georgia history, Tracy Waits, was at Rockdale County. And her high school coach from Rockdale County got a job at Towers and thought that he could just bring her with him. Billy Armstead, who was the athletic director at DeKalb County, called me on the phone and said, Coach Huckaby, I got Tracy Waits standing here in the Towers office trying to enroll in school. Should I let her? And he was asking me that because if she enrolled, she would immediately become ineligible at Rockdale County and at Towers. She wouldn't have been ineligible anywhere because she had transferring without a move. And I said, no, don't do that. Don't do that to her. You go over there and explain to them she's got to go back to Rockdale County. And she did. And they won the state championship that year. And it would have been horrible. So if people could just operate on the golden rule, do unto others you would have them do unto you, or more importantly, do unto the players what's best for the players, I think we could keep our game a lot purer. But it's the game we got, and I love it, and I know you love it, and I've enjoyed talking to you about high school football today, and I hope we can be together a lot more. And Chastity, would you tell us what's coming up one more time Friday night?
Absolutely, I would love to. So you can catch the game of the week. So that's going to be Loganville High School at Monroe area. Big rival game. So grateful to have the coach in the studio today. So tune in live on Good Time Oldies 102.5, which is our sister station here. Or you can also stream us on WKUNradio.com. And then Brock Bridges will be here on 92.3 side, giving all the updates for the games and state games, scores, stats, all that good stuff, along with keeping the country hits playing.
That's the real skinny.
That's
I
right.
think I got the information a little bit jumbled, so that's
No,
why
you
I
did
asked the
great.
professional to do it.
No, you did great.
Kevin, what are your final thoughts?
We talked about the purity of high school football. I've got my son who actually plays for me. That's been special. You know, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to coach my son or not.
What class is he? What does he
He's going
play?
to be a sophomore. He plays. He's a receiver and a safety. He actually, played some in the game on Friday night, and he's a backup on Friday night. But he's probably going to play 3/4 of JV. But just having him around, and just doing that, it's just the purity. I see it in his eyes, and able to go home with them. So, I want to keep it like that. And yes, this is my 39th year of coaching, 38 years of teaching, and I just it is so pure high school football, and I just hope we can keep it like that.
Kevin, thank you so much for being with us. I hope you've enjoyed listening to us talk about old times and new times in high school football. And do yourself a favor, wherever you are, whatever community you're in, go out on a Friday night, buy a ticket, sit in the stands, have some popcorn, have a hot dog, look at the cheerleaders, listening to the band because they work real hard too, and just soak in the atmosphere. You don't have to know the players. I was at the game Friday night, the North Oconee County game, and the lady beside me said, "Which one of those is yours?" They're all mine. I'm a part of that community. So high school football is the purest thing around. So do yourself a favor and get out and watch a game this week and every week. And if you can't watch, tune in and listen to us because we're going to bring you some of the best football in the area. I'm Darryl Huckaby, and sometimes you just have to say, "What the Huck?"